So hi there and welcome to this week's video. My name is Charles and today I've come down to a piece of local parkland in central Milton Keynes called Campbell Park to photograph a sculpture, a well-known landmark here called the Light Pyramid. What I'm going to be doing today is actually photographing the Light Pyramid, but not doing some regular photography. I'm actually going to be doing a bit of infrared. So I've come down, there's some quite dramatic clouds in the sky, and I think that could work really well with this kind of image. So I'm just going to run through the whole process with you, show you how I set up my shot, find my exposure, and also we'll take a little look at editing at the end of the video. So anyway, hopefully you'll stick along for the ride, and I hope you enjoy everything we go through today. So what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to attach one of these to the camera. Now this is the infrared filter. What this actually does is essentially it filters out all normal light and just leaves you with the infrared spectrum. These come in different densities. This one's a medium density, 720 microns. I sort of went for the medium one because I figured I don't actually want to be spending hours and hours exposing. These are so dark you're going to need to do some quite long exposures. So before I attach the infrared filter, what I'm actually going to need to do is take a test shot just so I can get my focus. Once you've got the filter attached to the camera, there's absolutely no way that you're going to be able to get any kind of focus on the shot because your screen is going to appear pitch black. So let's get on and take our test shot. So I've pretty much got my shot set up now. I'm shooting at f7.1 and we're at 250th of a second, ISO 100. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my focus. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to zoom straight in on the Light Pyramid here and use the autofocus just to make sure this is pin sharp. Now then what I'm going to do, just going to simply zoom back out. Now I know the main subject of this image is going to be totally in focus. Then what I do, I simply switch this over to manual, and this way I can't adjust the focus. So there we go, I've now taken my test shot. This was just to get the focus on the camera, but it actually is quite a nice shot with the dramatic clouds in the sky. What I actually did was also I set my 2-second timer just to help reduce any camera shake. I think this is always good to do if you're using a tripod. Also, make sure you've also turned off your image stabilization because it could shift a little bit as you're taking your image. So this pretty much just attaches to the front of the camera like any normal filter. So let's get it on there now. So now we've attached our filter, we'll need to try and work out our exposure. Now this is going to be quite tricky because it's so dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set my ISO really high and do what I'm going to call throwaway frames. So essentially I'm just going to do some really high ISO, really high noise photographs that will just help me work out my exposure when I can bring the ISO back down to something more reasonable, which will of course extend the exposure time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm essentially going to work out the exposure I'm going to need to take. So I've got this now set to ISO 51,200, which is way higher than I'm actually intending to shoot with. And I'm going to take a throwaway frame. So I'm going to take my shot, and this way we can see if we're going to get the correct kind of exposure for the image. Now I can see that's actually pretty good. So that's not a bad exposure at all. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to now use photo pills to work out the exposure that we need if we reduce that ISO to something much more reasonable. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use photo pills. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to just set my ISO. So let's set the ISO to 51,200, okay. And the exposure was 1/20th of a second. Okay, and f7.1. So that's great. So now what we can do, we'll keep f7.1 as it is. We'll go down to ISO 800 because I think that's probably a reasonable ISO that we could go down to. In fact, let's change that. We can go down to, let's go down to 400. And we'll get a 6-second exposure. So let's try that out now. So I'm going to change the ISO back down to ISO 400, f7.1, and we want the shutter speed, and then we want the shutter speed to 6 seconds. There we go, and 2-second timer again. Let's click OK. Let's take a look at our shot, and that's not looking too bad. It's a shame we've got some people stood up in front of the pyramid who weren't there a few minutes ago, but never mind. Hopefully they'll move in a minute and we'll still get the light. So now we've gone through the process of photographing an infrared image. So let's pop on home, get this into Lightroom and take a little look and see what we've got. Okay, so I'm back home now, and I've realised I've made a couple of fundamental errors today. So I thought I'd run you through them now, because this is fast becoming a how not to do infrared photography video. Now, the first mistake I made was I forgot to talk about the fact that I'm using a regular camera, not an infrared converted camera. Now this means I have to deal with longer exposures because of the infrared filter that is on the sensor. Now this sensor blocks out about 95% of all the infrared light, and this means you can still do infrared photography with a normal camera, but your exposure times are much longer. And that's the reason why my exposures were coming out between 6 and about 25 seconds today. But I think I can forgive that. But the thing I can't forgive is coming out in totally the wrong conditions. I thought that going out on a stormy day would add real drama to my infrared image, but it actually had the opposite effect. Now, without the strong sunlight, we didn't get any of that really high contrast, otherworldly sort of look that I was really hoping to get. And instead I got quite a flat, to be honest, actually a little bit boring image. Now this is quite frustrating, but ultimately I can learn from my mistakes, and next time I go out and do some infrared photography, I'm going to know that I need to go out on a day that's bright and sunny with high contrasts, normally the total opposite of the conditions you'd be looking for normally. So I think let's just carry on anyway. Let's take a little look at the image. Let's run through the editing, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Let's get into Lightroom and get editing. So here we have the image we're going to be editing today. As you can see, it's very red because obviously it's captured the infrared spectrum. Now what we're going to need to do is adjust the white balance so that we get more of a natural colour. But as you can see, the temperature can't go far enough to the left to adjust the image as much as we need. So the first thing we need to do is to create a DNG file, because we're going to use the DNG profile creator tool from Adobe. So I'm simply going to right click my image and I'm going to go to export, then export to DNG. So once we've done that, we can Google for the Adobe DNG profile editor, and there we go. We click on the link, go to downloads and download either the macOS version or the Windows version depending on your machine. I've already downloaded it to my computer, so I'm simply going to open the file. Here we go. And then we need to just go to File, and then we need to go to Open DNG Image. And then you need to find your file that you've downloaded. So here we go, here's my DNG file. So I'm going to click Open. And now we can see our image. So we're going to go into Color Matrices, and then we're going to go into White Balance Calibration, and I'm going to pull this all the way to the left. And then we go into File, and then we could do Export for your camera profile type. And then that should automatically save into the camera profiles for Lightroom. So click on Save. I've already done this, so I'm just going to click Cancel. Now I'm going to go back into Lightroom. To choose your profile, we go into the profile browser, and you should see your new profile that you've created right here. If you don't see this, just restart Lightroom and it should show up. So I'm going to select this profile and I'm going to click Close. Now, as you can see, we've got a much wider temperature range here. So I'm now going to get my pipette tool, find an area of my screen that I'm happy with to get the white balance, and there we go. Look, we've now got our image back to a more natural color range. But this is going to be an infrared image, so we don't necessarily want it to be natural. You know, this could be an alien sculpture on another planet, for example. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to do some basic edits. So I'm going to pull up my highlights here. I think I'm going to I'm going to pull up my shadows slightly actually. I'm going to pull up my whites a bit, but I'm going to pull my blacks down because I want to try and get a bit of that extra contrast in the sky. That's a bit too far. I'm going to add a little bit of contrast here, so 20 on the contrast. And then I'm going to boost the clarity a little bit just to pull out some of the grass. I'm going to leave vibrance and saturation as they are, and just give the tone curve a little tweak. Let's just drop those highlights a bit. Yeah, I think we've gone a bit too far now. There we go. So now I've made my basic edits. Oh, and next I'm just going to add a gradient to the sky, just so I can reduce the exposure. So just going to double click effect, and this will just reset my gradient. And I'm going to drop my exposure until I really darkened up some of those clouds. I think that's looking just as I want now. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to run down to noise reduction. If I zoom in, you can see it's not the cleanest of images. I think some of this noise is caused by the filter itself. So I'm going to push up my noise reduction to about 30. I wouldn't normally go this high on the noise reduction, but I think in this case I'm going to need to. Zoom back out, let's just check on here. I reckon let's just add a bit of colour noise reduction as well, just to take out some of that yellow tinting that we're getting. There we go, I think that's looking a bit better now. So now that we've edited the image, I'm going to right click this and I'm going to go to edit in Adobe Photoshop, where we're going to make some more changes. So now we're in Photoshop, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a layer adjustment, and I'm going to add the levels. And what I'm going to do is actually flip the light and the dark levels here and essentially invert the image. So I'm going to click OK on that. Go back to my layers, and then I'm going to adjust the layer blending mode to hue on the levels adjustment that we've just done. Now we've got like a really quite a nice funky purple grass, and it's actually helped a little bit with the sky as well. I'm not going to make any more adjustments in Photoshop, but yeah, I'm going to save this and go back into Lightroom. So here we go, we've now got the image back in Lightroom, and I'm going to make a few final adjustments to this image just to give it a real otherworldly appearance. And this is all going to be centered around the colors. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the color grading tool to really sort of change the color of the sky. So my highlights, I'm going to pull my highlights across, and I want to get a nice sort of blue, turquoisey blue into the sky. You could choose any colour you want. You could go around to pink or orange, but let's, I think, a really nice sort of turquoise. It gives it that sort of impression of lightning, which I really like. And then I'm also going to drop a bit of extra colour into the shadows. As you can see, that goes into the sky as much as anything, and it gives it a bit more drama and depth. So I think that's looking good. So now I'm going to go back up and I'm going to add one last gradient up here. And we're going to reset this, double click, and I want to adjust the temperature because I want to just bring out some more of these blues in, just to really look like there's some lightning happening in behind the clouds. and I'm just going to pull up the whites just to really enhance those. And there we have it, we have our alien landscape infrared photoshopped image, and I'm going to put it up on screen now for you to see. So thanks so much for watching this video on how not to do infrared photography. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving it a big thumbs up, stick a comment below and let me know how you've got on with infrared photography. And if you've really enjoyed this content and you'd like to see more, maybe you'd want to see a follow-up video on how you can actually get good results with infrared photography, then click that subscribe button and I'll see you next time. But anyway, that's enough from me. Take care and goodbye.